Welcome back to the Provisionist Perspective. I'm Drew.
And I'm Eric.
And we want you to be firmly persuaded of God's love and provision for everyone. That's why we're doing this. Today, we're covering our debate from last week, a little bit of a debate review. And speaking of persuading and wanting people to be firmly convinced of God's love and provision for everyone, I feel like I was just looking at a few clips, and I feel like we softballed this one, man. We just for the guys that like the contention, we softballed it pretty hard.
What's the look? It's like this new gel. It's like this new gel, and it like stuck it here and not. I took a shower like hours ago, dude. What the heck?
BJ's throwing shade.
I agree with you. We did softball it a bit. That's the one. That's actually my number one. The first thing I wanted to say. The first criticism, because I thought what we could do is get the hey, here's everything we did wrong out of the way right away. Should we do that stuff first?
Let's do it. Sure. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. This is what. Look. Let's just be honest. That's what everybody's here for, anyway. That's what everybody is here for. Everybody's here for the mea culpas and we should have done this and we should have done that. And everyone's here to tell us what we did wrong.
Just tell us in the comments and give us what I like to call a stinky sandwich. You know, you got to give us something good and then give us the criticism, the bad, and then something good again so that we can just receive it. And that's the PG-13 named version of that. But carry on.
So, well, okay. It was our first debate. And I was not expecting anything. I don't know what to expect. I know I can write stuff. I can do that. But putting it into a format where there's timed and then you're doing rebuttals and cross-examinations, I felt, you tell me, I felt utterly lost in the like rebuttals and cross-exams in terms of, man, it is harder to be confrontational in person, right?
Sure. Yeah. 100% for sure.
And that's what I felt. I like we kind of softballed it. I think I'm correcting on my curmudgeonly nature that I know how I can come across, and so I'm gonna correct it.
Right.
I don't know. That's
It's funny, I know you guys want us to get into the content, but on a personal note, kind of a funny note, I was talking to my wife the other day, and I was like, I think that I'm more blunt than I actually am. And I'm just not like I receive bluntness quite well. I like for people to be really direct with me, but I am a lot less like, I'll say, I'm going to talk to this person and I'm going to say all this. And Kirsty's like, no, you're not, and she's real direct. Like she'll say stuff and I'll be like, oh man, maybe you should have just softened that a little bit. So she's definitely the direct one, the prophetess among us both. But yeah, so definitely softballed it a little bit. And one thing that I learned, since we're getting out of the way, the things that we did wrong or whatever. I actually, and I prompted us to do this. We wrote out our intros, which is fine, our openers. And then I was like, also, we need to write our closers. And I don't know if you were thinking this, Eric, but, after the fact, we had written out our closers. And one guy actually commented in the comments during the live debate, like, why are you guys reading your closers, And then I said, well, this is just kind of what you do. But I was actually wrong because the closer is the section where you're listening to the whole thing that they've just said and then taking notes, and then you just have to respond on the fly, because that is the last chance that you get to respond to anything that they've said. Because in the Q&A, there were things like they would, we would be asked a question, then they would answer a question, and then I would want to respond, or I would want to say something about something previous to the debate, and you can't. It's done, pretty much by that point. Q&A is more or less just interaction with the audience. And to be honest, some of the questions, and I can't really remember what they were, but some of the questions may or may not even be related to the point of the debate, right?
Right.
So
I don't want to, this being the first debate and my first debate, and Marlon, the host, has done has hosted hundreds. I don't want to throw too much shade at his structure in terms of, I know better and I have so much experience and he should do it like this because of these solid reasons of why. I don't have these solid reasons. I'll just say, from a debate perspective of me participating in something that I was also watching, right? Because part of it is you're participating and part of it is you're watching. It's kind of a really weird experience. Yeah. You're watching, you're interacting, you're supposed to be taking notes. And so the format of rebuttal, and right after the intro, and then a cross-exam. The cross-exam I thought was fine. Cross-exam was fine.
Yeah.
The rebuttal right after, and then the Q&A, each team gets a minute. What? And we ended, an hour earlier.
Oh, each team gets a minute, right? Because it was like they would ask a question to a particular side,
right? And
then that particular side got to more or less answer as much as they wanted, and then the other team gets 1 minute to respond to the question that was asked from.
Okay, got you.
From what I remember, anyway.
Which is just what? That one felt so limiting. I thought we were over the limiting section. The limiting stuff was the debate. The time stuff was the debate. The Q&A takes as long as the Q&A takes. Well, if you're talking about Q&A, and you're talking about Ben Shapiro at a college campus, what is going viral? What are the clips that go viral? It's the Q&A. The Q&A is what goes nuts, because you get actual real-time feedback and responses, and some of that will take a few minutes. And so getting through as many questions as possible, but we ended an hour early. So those were the two awkward things for me. And then as far as the writing down the closers, that's a good word. I hadn't thought about that one. That's a good point. Here's my rebuttal. I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if I could form
it's challenging.
Form a closer off of the material there. If the closer is, hey, write down all the things that you didn't get to say, or you didn't get to respond to, or all the clarify you didn't get to do, and do that. Okay, maybe I could do that. But I was the same thing as you. I was thinking the two things that are prepared are the intro and the closer. I can see where that left things lacking because of so many things that were left on the table during the debate. And we can get into those after we stop mea culpaing.
Which is the benefit of having a podcast. We can do this and we can actually respond to all the things we couldn't respond to, whereas the other guys, well, maybe they can. John has a podcast, but I doubt he would spend time to respond to that on this. But I don't know if you made this clear, Eric, but regarding the or if others understood this, maybe you did, and I was tinkering or had an ADD moment. But the opener followed by the rebuttal, followed by the second team's opener, followed by the rebuttal was like, for instance, when you started giving the rebuttal to their opener, some of what you were saying was in my opener. And so it felt like there was this overlap that was kind of made some of the things that I was going to say a little bit redundant or repetitive, or even something like you might want to respond and say, well, this, but then you saw, my opener was in the document. And so you would know, well, Eric's going to say this. I mean, Drew's going to say this. Do I say this or not? So that was a little bit of a weird format. And again, this is just us speaking from our own personal experience and how it was to us. We're not saying that it should be this way or this is the right way to do it. We're just reflecting that was kind of, as we went into the debate, I think it was just a little bit before all of a sudden I was thinking, wait a second, how is this going to work? It might have even been in the middle of the debate when they started their opener with the category creation. And I had that in my opener, but I knew that we were going to be rebutting what they were just saying before my opener.
Yeah.
And so it was just kind of weird. Yeah.
Awkward. And then I want to say, the other thing I want to say here is I really appreciate all of our patrons, and we're going to be getting an upgraded camera soon because of your patronage. We're going to be upgrading stuff, and so things will start to be looking a little bit different here as far as visual, the lighting, and some of the stuff, because we're now getting a little bit into where we can make some of these changes. It's very hard to send money to New Zealand, so that's kind of what we're working. We're figuring that out. But I say that because we got to get onto our Discord afterwards and hop in a video chat room and kind of decompress and debrief from the debate a little bit. And Kate and Matthew were able to join us, and kind of we were able to do those things. And it was just a interesting decompression from
immediately afterwards.
Was such an interesting experience. So yeah, being confrontational is harder than I thought. And then the format threw me off to where both my greenness in the debate and also maybe a little bit of the format, or how at least I responded to the format. I didn't feel all that put together during the on the fly rebuttal cross exam. And maybe that just comes with experience and you just have to keep doing it.
Right. And I think the trickiness, I said this to somebody in a comment somewhere, the trickiness with somebody commented that I was talking too much and you weren't. And I think that the trickiness of being a 2v2 is that, and because there's a little bit of delay as well, if I'm waiting for you to say something and you're formulating your thoughts, I don't we have dead air or something. And then I'm like, I don't know whether I should just go ahead and launch in and then let Eric follow up and stuff. And so that was also a little bit tricky.
And exactly. I thought you were saving my butt. I didn't think that you were talking over me. So I saw that comment. It seemed like Drew was talking over him. No, I wasn't completing my thoughts, and I was pausing, and Drew was saving my bacon. So that's what that was.
Well, for what it's worth, I didn't see it that way. So I just felt like I was being a loudmouth. So I kind of agreed with the commenter more than anything.
I don't think so. That's not. It didn't feel like that way to me.
By the way, before we launch into this, and Eric, if there's a timestamp you want me to go to or something, I have it. I have the debate here in front of me, but I'm gonna show at the end of this broadcast. So stay tuned. My favorite part of the debate and the worst mistake in it. Okay, so you just have to stay tuned to the end, and we're gonna show that at the end. Okay. Eric doesn't know what this is.
No, I don't. He
does, but he doesn't. So, anyways, okay. We'll continue. So, where should we start at, Eric?
We're at the tip of the top of the mountain, but we're only halfway up. Okay. Okay. I don't know. Are you done with your mea culpas?
I have one more mea culpa. I think so. Well, we'll get to one mea culpa as well towards the middle when we start talking about some of the cross examination. I don't want to jump into that just yet, but yeah.
Got it. All right. You do it. You do you. You do it.
I mean, you want me to go there now?
No. Go to the, you got timestamps if you want to.
Oh, no, I don't have any. No.
I've misunderstood.
So why don't we, do you want to just play the affirmative opener or play our rebuttal or something, and then we can talk about it? Or where do you want to start?
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't answer your question. Play the affirmative opener.
Okay, here we go.
So an opening statement, I want to define our position. Our position is that God, for his own glory, has planned.
Let us know if you can hear that.
World, everything that has happened and will happen in his creation. The plan does not change. His plan encompasses everything from the biggest events to the smallest, from the crucifixion of Jesus to the results of casting lots. For the sake of time, I'm going to cover 9 scripture texts in support of our position. I want you to see these 6 things in these scripture texts. So number 1, we're going to see that there is a biblical distinction between God's moral will and his decreed will. Secondly, God explicitly says that he has planned the future and will carry out his plan. Thirdly, God knows the events of the future before they happen, including those that involve the actions of humans. Fourth, the scripture passages link God's knowledge of the future with his decree of the future. He knows the future because he's decreed the future. Fifthly, God's plan for the future is...
I think that re-listening to this now, he went through these items, and maybe they're gonna do this, but I would have appreciated a passage for each one of these claims so that we could actually deal with the text in question. They probably felt like we didn't deal with this, but that was probably because I was like, well, he's just talking about some things that he thinks.
There's nothing to deal with except to be like,
this
nope.
plan was made before the foundation of the world. So firstly, we want to distinguish between God's moral will and his decreed will. God's moral will is what he has revealed to man about what man is supposed to do. For example, God's moral will says, do not murder, or love your neighbor as yourself. It's against God's moral will to kill, for example. But God's decreed will, on the other hand, regards God's plan for whatsoever comes to pass. It includes everything that happens, including the actions of men, including their sinful actions. Yet God does not force people to sin, nor does he tempt them, and he's in no way the author of sin.
I'm just going to increase the speed a little bit.
To their own evil desires, as we will see in the following examples. In Genesis 50, Joseph said to his brothers who had sold him into slavery, he said, as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So God had planned to put Joseph in Egypt through the means of being sold into slavery. He had planned to put Joseph in a position of power to store up food, so that during the years of famine, Joseph, his father, and his brothers, as well as many other people, would be kept alive.
I love
see that it was a sin for Joseph's brother.
I love the idea that plan equals determined. It's so hard. This is something that I have a specific question that I would love to crowdsource here when we get to it. But I love this idea that plan equals determinism. And I don't really know. And I don't really know. I pointed it out, but I don't know how to express the absurdity of it besides just to call it absurd.
Right.
And maybe I should have. Maybe that's what it is. You have to use stronger language to get it where God planned that Joseph, and we're forever going to use this now, right? God planned for Joseph to land up to step 1. God planned for Joseph to end up in Egypt. Step 2, step 3, immutable precreation, divine decree. And I guess that's what you have to do is you just have to go, the idea is flat out absurd that if God makes plans, therefore he's determining everything. And it's also absurd in that Joseph story to say, and I maybe this is something that I need to work on if I'm going to be doing debate or discussion in the realm of ideas on the YouTubes. Then I need to be comfortable with saying this stuff in front of the interlocutor.
Right.
Because what I want to say right now is, and then when you go on to say that the passage that says God your brothers intended it for evil and God intended it for good is such a free will passage. It is absurd to assert that teaches determinism. Words mean things, and if we're supposed to take the Bible seriously, when it says that man intended it for evil, your brothers intended it for evil, it doesn't mean God secretly also intended it for evil. It's just not what it means. And
or secretly intended their evil, like wanted them to do the evil.
Right. Secretly decreed their evil such that they couldn't have done differently. It just doesn't mean that. And it doesn't matter how many times you say it doesn't, it does. It simply does. And you have to come up with some sort of positive case for this, and you're not even trying. And so there's nothing for me to rebut except those words don't mean that.
And And one of the biggest things that you guys should watch this, by the way, Chris Fisher did a really good review of our debate a couple days after we did it, and it was phenomenal. I learned a lot. And that's kind of where our step one, this step two, step three, immutable precreation divine decree comes from. I wanted to clip that and put that in here, but I didn't end up having time. But so let's take this. So what they're trying to do, or what they were trying to do, is say, here's an example of Joseph. Here's an example of the prescriptive will and the decretive will. Therefore, there is an immutable precreation divine decree. Where? Even if we said, okay, yep, two different wills here. Maybe you could even say, Chris highlighted the point that with regards to the crucifixion, maybe God just took control of the universe for 10 years, and then let it go. And then that's how he predetermined the cross. So let's just agree determinism, predetermining the cross for 10 years. How does that mean pre-creation, immutable divine decree of all things? And it just doesn't. So similarly with the Joseph thing, they were seeking to establish, here's an example of our pre-creation divine decree. And what the debate really was is determinism true? Which we shouldn't have, which we should have pressed more on. Like, okay, what we're talking about is determinism, and an immutable precreation divine decree equals determinism. But where is the immutable precreation divine decree in the Bible? So,
yep.
Let's keep going.
Brothers to sell them into slavery, yet it was in accordance with God's decreed plan. So their actions of selling them into slavery were against God's moral will, yet it explicitly says it was in accordance with God's decreed will, as it says God meant it for good. Another example, Acts 2:23 says, this Jesus delivered up according to the definite plan and foreknowledge of God, you crucified and killed by the hands of lawless men. So God had a determined plan, harismene boule in Greek, that Jesus would be crucified. There was no possibility that it would not happen the way God planned for it to happen. However, notice that the people who killed him are still held.
What does the Greek do for their position that it doesn't do for ours? What does the Hebrew do for their position that it doesn't do for ours? This happened a few times in the debate, but anyways, we're never going to get through this if I keep doing this.
Accountable for their sins. They're called lawless men. So we see a distinction between God's moral will and his decreed here as well. They violated God's moral will by murdering Jesus, but it was in accordance with God's decreed will, his definite plan. Similarly, Acts 4:27 and 28. For truly in this city there were gathered together against your holy servant Jesus, whom you anointed, both Herod, Pontius Pilate, along with the Gentiles and the peoples of Israel, to do whatever your hand and your plan had predestined to take place. In this text, we are told that God predestined what all the players in Jesus' death were going to do. Herod, Pontius Pilate, Gentiles, and Jews did everything the way that God had decreed or planned for them to do it. All these groups also were guilty of sin in their actions in the involvement of the murder of Jesus. Yet it says it was by the hand of God, the Chair in Greek, the agency of God. See, back in Acts 2, it says it was by the hand, or the Chair in Greek, the same word and usage, of lawless men. So these men who killed Jesus were against God's moral will. It was done by their hands, but in a different sense, it was also done by God's hand, but through the agency of his divine decree, his decreed will. So
this is
God's moral and decreed will.
I don't really know
on God's decreed will.
I don't really know how to bring this into debate. One of the parts of Chris Fisher's review of this that I didn't really quite know how this would work in an actual debate. But this is an example of that, is this. Yeah, but you just lack imagination. You can't imagine how God can determine some things and determine other things. And that's a flaw within you, and it's not an argument. So when it says God's hand determined this, but man's hand determined this, therefore, immutable precreation, divine decree. All that is you lacking imagination about how God could do something that maybe you can't understand. Maybe you don't know how you would do it, but doing it in a different way besides determinism. And I don't know how that would play in a debate, going like, you have a lack of imagination. But that's an example of it. I'm sorry, you can't imagine a scenario in which God determines something to happen, and at the same time, man is truly, freely, libertarianly freely doing what he wants to do. I can imagine a scenario in which that takes place. I think God is capable of that, but just because you don't have that imagination. It's not really an argument. Can't really respond to it except to point out you're limited in your imagination. I don't know.
And one of the mea culpas in this too, I think, is that it's not about telling them what we believe necessarily. It's about the debate question. So, for instance, you could respond to this. Let's presuppose that determinism is true for 50 years, or 100 years. How does that mean immutable precreation, divine decree is biblical? Show us in the Bible where an immutable precreation. You can say, well, this is how God accomplishes his determinism of all of this over here. But then you're just saying, this is how he does it because reasons. You're not providing scriptural stuff here. I wanted to interact with some of the
of course.
Here. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Of course. But they're not doing it to enhance the audience's understanding of their position. They're doing it because they believe they're the scholarly ones. And I think for good reasons, they believe they're the scholarly ones, because as we've said 100 times on this program, the Reformed Presby perspective has published us into the ground. And they're the ones with all the letters after their names and all the CVs and everything like that with published works under them. And that's
they seem to actually care about these issues, and those with the PhDs and stuff on the other side don't want to rock the boat, it seems, from my perspective.
Right. So they're quoting the Greek as a sort of as a club to be like, we know more than you. We know more than you. See how the Greek words, and but it doesn't do anything for the audience to understand their position better. Right.
And one of the points and maybe we're just going to keep pointing people over to his review, Chris Fisher's review, is, he pointed out that just because you're saying this Hebrew word doesn't mean that it's packaged with all of the things that you think it means. And he gave the example of, my wife is the most beautiful woman in the entire world. What does that even mean? Maybe I'm being sarcastic. Maybe I mean that she's literally the most beautiful woman in the world. Maybe I'm, responding to a joke or something like that. So context determines the meaning of words. There's no such thing as even a sentence, let alone a word, that's prepackaged with all of this meaning, which was why in your opener you pointed out the whole king's decrees and why can't king's decrees be disobeyed and stuff like that. So let's keep moving here.
In general, James chapter 4 verses 13 to 15 says, "Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and make a trade and profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil." James can only make this argument because of the premise that the Lord knows the future and has a decree about the future. Since his decree is unknown to us before it happens in time, we ought not to be so arrogant to say that we will bring something to pass in our lives in the future. See, things only happen in our lives if it's the Lord's will. In Greek, thelo, if he is willing to be willing. So if the Lord is willing for something to happen, then it will happen, it says. See, this text is very important. This text does not limit God's decreed will to any special event in particular. It's applied to everyday, mundane things in life, such as going into a certain town and doing business there. It's a principle. James was teaching a principle that whatever we plan, we should say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. And that principle applies to everything we plan to do in life. And there.
What we should have asked about this question, because this was pointed out, and we did push back on this. And again, we should have said, how does saying, if the Lord wills, with regards to our plans, controvert our position? No, there is no immutable precreation divine decree in the Bible. And let's say your particular view of this is true in terms of determinism, how does that equal pre-creation divine decree? And their point was to extrapolate among lots being thrown and these mundane plans all being, according to them, determined in the sense of deterministically determined or compatibilistically determined equals meticulous divine control equals immutable precreation divine decree. So there's a lot of steps there that need to be made.
Yeah. It is a Logical, right? The pushback should be. I think the pushback should be twofold. The pushback should be twofold. That okay, you're making a logical deduction. You're making an inference that since, therefore, but that's not the debate topic. So you haven't proven your case. You've just
Which we should have kept pushing. That was the thing that we should have kept hitting them with was, listen, how does this prove a divine immutable precreation decree? And Michael says here, if determinism was true, wouldn't their plans be decreed by God, whether they say by God's will or not? And so I think that a lot of these passages are libertarian language passages saying, if you want to go do this, say if the Lord wills, then he will either permit you or he won't permit you. That doesn't mean immutable precreation divine decree. It makes you feel like you're taking crazy pills. You and I were interacting with someone. Oh, did I accidentally clicked another comment? So we were interacting with someone on Twitter earlier yesterday or day before, depending on, it was a period of a couple days maybe, where he said, let's solve this determinism problem once and for all. And then he posted a bunch of passages about lots being cast, specifically the passage that they cited here, Proverbs 16:33, which I responded to in the cross-examination. You can go look at that. But the point is, how does God determining all lots, let's say all dice throws in the whole entire world, how does that equal pre-creation immutable divine decree? How does it even equal meticulous divine control? Maybe God just likes controlling lots.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that I was, and this brings to my mind that where my mindset was in the debate. I think that my mindset was to prove my case and rather than pick apart theirs. I wasn't looking for those little things to pick apart theirs.
Right.
And that's what I should have been doing for the rebuttal and for the cross exams was what are the ways in which I should pick that apart. And again, I don't know. It's hard to know how appropriate this kind of thing is. And here it sounds fine. It sounds innocuous, palatable to say, if I go up to the city, I should say not that I'm going to go up to the city, but if the Lord wills, then I'll go up to the city. Sounds fine to say that. It sounds a whole lot different to say, I'm going to go rape this woman. You shouldn't say you're going to go rape this woman. What you should say is, if the Lord wills, you're going to go rape this woman.
Right.
And so in the same, and then make your argument from there. So in the same way, whenever we commit evil, and then whenever we hurt someone else, we should say that the Lord wills it. I'm just not thinking in those combative terms. And I'm not saying that, I'm saying that maybe that's wrong. You have to push it to its logical end in a debate, maybe.
Because in situations like this, those of you guys that are watching, you are our audience. Those of you that watch this, you were and are our audience. We're actually not trying to convince our opponents because, and similarly to them not trying to convince us, we're trying to make their position look untenable biblically and to show everyone else that. And sometimes that requires being a little bit firmer and stronger, like you've pointed out, Eric. And so that would be something that I would try to do in the future, but it is hard. It's hard not to be nice, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, we're talking with them beforehand, right? In the few minutes beforehand, and like we have almost everything in common except this.
Right.
So it's just
Right. Yeah.
Therefore, God's decreed will applies to everything we do in life. Another text, Isaiah 14:24-27. The Lord of hosts has sworn, as I have planned, so shall it be, and as I have purposed, so shall it stand. I will break the Assyrian in my land, and on my mountains trample him underfoot. And in verse 20,
here's what we should have done. I just want to say this, and then I'm gonna let it roll. listen to this opener and ask yourself, does this passage teach an immutable pre-creation divine decree? Go.
27, it says, for the Lord of hosts has purpose, and who will annul it? His hand is stretched out, and who will turn it back? This text tells us that God has a plan and that his plan will stand. Whatever he's planned to do, he will do. The plan's also unchangeable. He says, as I have planned, so shall it be, period. Whatever God plans to do, since nothing can annul his plan, he will carry out his plan the way that he had planned to do it. Isaiah 46, 9-11 says, for I am God, and there is no other. I am God, and there's none like me, declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times things not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will accomplish all my purpose. Calling a bird of...
Does this passage teach an immutable pre-creation divine decree?
Pray from the east, the man of my counsel from a far country. I have spoken, and I will bring it to pass. I have purposed, and I will do it. One of the unique attributes of God is that he knows the future, he says. God declares the future, and therefore, the future is fixed and unchangeable. See, he knows exactly what will take place in the future, and there's no possibility that God is wrong concerning what he has declared will take place in the future. See, if God says something will take place in the future, then it must be certain that it will take place, since God cannot make errors, nor can he lie. So the future is certain in God's mind, and is therefore in reality a certain fixed and unchangeable future. Since God knows all things, he therefore doesn't learn.
What do you make of this argument, Eric? The future is certain in God's mind, and therefore it is unchangeable and fixed.
It's terrible.
Because this is one of the things that they wanted to catch us on, and that they asked us about in the cross-examination. That
I knew where they were going with this.
That I answered, and then they just let go. They didn't say anything else, which I thought was kind of strange. They didn't follow that up with because you gave the answer that they wanted to press on, but they didn't press on that. But how would you, what would you say to this? Because we didn't actually get to talk about this particular point. I'm actually curious because my position has evolved on this over time, and I'm wondering what you think.
If he knows the future is certain in his mind and it's fixed. Oh, okay, but that doesn't mean determinism.
But would you say that it's fixed, like it's fixed, but that he hasn't fixed it and that we are fixing it? Think about it. We'll keep playing.
Things. That raises the question, how does God know the details of the future if he did not learn them? And the answer is because he has planned it. The text links his knowledge of the future to his decree. It says, he declares from ancient times things yet not done, saying, my counsel shall stand and I will accomplish all my purpose. So he declares things not yet done because his counsel will stand and because he has a decree about the future. Psalm 33, 10-11. The Lord brings the counsel of the nations to nothing. He frustrates the plans of the people. The counsel of the Lord stands forever, the plans of his heart to all generations. So even though men...
Did that passage teach an immutable pre-creation divine decree in Psalm 33?
And make plans that don't come to pass necessarily. When God makes a plan, it does come to pass. So the text teaches. Ephesians 1, 3-5, and also verse 11 says, blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who has blessed us in Christ with every spiritual blessing in the heavenly places, even as he chose us in him before the foundation of the world, that we should be holy and blameless before him. In love, he predestined us for adoption as sons through Jesus Christ, according to the purpose of his will. And in verse 11, it says, we have been predestined according to the purpose of him who works all things according to the counsel of his will. So in these verses, we were taught that God chose his people in Christ before the foundation of the world, that is pre-creation, that he predestined his people, determined beforehand, before the foundation of the world in this case, his people for adoption as sons through Jesus according to the kind intention of his will. And we're told in verse 11 that he works all things according to the counsel of his will. That word for counsel in that phrase, boule, in Greek, means plan, a series of steps to be carried out or goals to be accomplished. And the term will...
Does the word plan mean pre-creation, immutable, divine decree?
And the phrase counsel of his will is the term thelema in Greek, meaning his desire, his wish, intention, decision. So what's being said here? Paul's saying that believers have been predestined according to the purpose or determination, that's prothesis in Greek, to the purpose of him who works all things according to the counsel, boule, or plan of his will or desire. So in other words, God works all things in accordance with what he desires. He plans what he desires, thelema, to do, to happen, and works everything in accordance with his plan, his boule. He works everything according to his desire and plan. And finally, Hebrews 6:17. So when God desired to show more convincingly...
I don't mean this to sound rude or whatever. And maybe John, Brother Patrick will watch this and stuff. But why? Why throw in all of the Greek? How does that support your position? How does it support your position? It just plan means plan, and will and desire means desire in English. It's like you're adding an extra barrier to, you need to understand these particular words in order to understand them the way that we do. Whereas he's already assuming that the word plan and counsel and will mean immutable, eternal, prior to creation.
I'll be a little bit more rude about this. Maybe this isn't rude at all. I'll just be a little bit more pointed about it, and I'll say something true, and then people can make with it as they will. When you are in first year Greek, you learn all the rules, okay? And you learn the rules and you learn the vocab. And then you do your first year and you learn all the declinations. You know a little bit of grammar, but you don't really know how to translate. You can't really translate yet. You can recite hundreds of vocab words, and you can recite hundreds and thousands of hundreds and in some cases thousands of declinations of the case endings and stuff. Then you get to second year Greek and you pull out an intermediate grammar, Greek grammar book. And the first thing my professor said to us, was, oh yeah, you know that stuff that you learned in the first? We taught you that to get you through it so that you could get where you are. You're going to need to throw out a lot of that though. You need to recognize that those aren't hard and fast rules, and that the words you think mean things don't mean that thing unless there's grammar associated. And so if you think a word means something, I need you to question. I need you to throw that out. I need you to question that, and because it will harm your translations. And you're going to need to know these words so you know the idea that the author is trying to get across, but it doesn't have any meaning until you have the whole thing translated and laid out.
Right.
And so the reason they're doing that stuff is because either they are just learned the first year Greek stuff, or they know we don't know their intermediate Greek grammar, and they think the first year Greek stuff will convince us.
Which is so much worse. The second option is so much worse.
It's whenever somebody says, I know my Greek, I know that they don't.
Right.
Because when you're done with 2.5 years of Greek, you go, I'm so glad that's over. And I learned so much. I also know nothing.
Right.
You are not a Greek scholar. You're not even close after 2.5 years. You're not even close. And you know it.
I mean, and think about that, right? Everyone that's watching this. So in our uni years, if you went to uni or university, or you went to, you had high school, we had prerequisites of foreign language credits, right? And you've taken 2 years of Spanish, maybe 2 years of French. How much Spanish and French do you know? I bet you don't know as much as I know. I bet you don't know as much Spanish as I know, because I lived in Mexico for a year and spoke it the entire time that I was there. Have you done that with Greek? Then you probably don't know your Greek. It's okay. It's
right.
okay.
And even if you did that in Greek,
breaks.
It's not Koine. So
right.
It's dead language.
So, and I get that it doesn't apply, but in that sense. But the point is like, we all know what it's like to have a couple of years of a language and you don't know it. People that tell me like, oh yeah, I speak Spanish, I'm not saying this arrogantly. I'm not saying this condescendingly. I just saying it as a matter of fact. People will say this and I'll be like, oh yeah, hey, how are you doing? What'd you do today? And they're like, Tango gato grande los pantalones. Like it's not.
Where's a cat? Where did the cat come in?
That was a line from Blue Streak. Remember from back in the day? This is Martin Lawrence. I have a big cat in my pants. We should probably continue with the. But good point, valid point about the Greek. It's good.
To the heirs of the promise, the unchangeable character of his purpose, he guaranteed it with an oath. In this text, regarding God's covenant promise to Abraham, the author of Hebrews encourages Christians, who are the heirs of the promise, to trust in God's promise of the gospel because God's plan does not change. So God's purpose, again, is boule here in Greek, means plan. God's purpose or plan.
I want to roll that back. What did he say?
God's covenant promise to Abraham, according to his desire and plan. And finally, Hebrews 6:17. So when God desired to show more convincingly to the heirs of the promise the unchangeable character of his purpose, he guaranteed it with an oath. In this text, regarding God's covenant promise to Abraham, the author of Hebrews encourages Christians, who are the heirs of the promise, to trust in God's promise of the gospel because God's plan does not change. So God's purpose, again, is...
I wish that I had seen this in the debate. He's proved my point for me. And I cover this in my opening after that, so maybe that's not why it's brought up again. But God does have an immutable promise to Abraham So he makes an immutable promise to Abraham. He chooses him. He says, this is my unchangeable promise to you. And then Hebrews talks about this, you know, he has an unchangeable promise in which he can't lie. You know, how does God making this immutable promise mean God has one plan that he's made prior to creation, one decree? It's immutable, unchangeable.
Here in Greek means plan. God's purpose or plan is unchangeable, it says. It says it literally could be rendered to show more convincingly to the heirs of the promise the unchangeableness of his plan. He guaranteed it with an oath. So God does not change his mind. He does not change his plan. It's a sure plan, and we can take comfort in that. So based upon
we should have honed in on this. And guys, if you've not seen it already, watch our episode on prayer where we talk about, you know, does God change his mind in response to prayer? His assertion here is that God doesn't change his mind. We talked about some of that, those passages in the Q&A. And so God has a plan and he doesn't change his mind. Therefore, immutable precreation, divine decree. I just don't see where he's, you know, anytime he says the word plan, he's thinking determinism, determinism, plan, step 2, step 3, determinism.
Well, and the reason, and this is so anti-Bible, because the reason that we can trust God is not because of determinism, but because of his character. It isn't, I can trust God that what is going to happen, what he promises will come to pass. I can trust that I am in his family. Doesn't do that. He can't do it. Yeah, right. I can trust that I'm in his family, despite my sins, despite my continual failings, that I'm in his family, that I will see Jesus in heaven one day. I can trust that's going to happen because he said so, and because his character is such that he is trustworthy. He is lovingly kind and he is trustworthy. That's what the Bible says. It doesn't say you can trust what God says because he determines everything. That's not the point.
And Yahweh's main MO, his modus operandi in the Old Testament, is to say to the Israelites, hey, I'm Yahweh, I'm your father. Remember this good stuff that I did back then?
Right.
That's me. He doesn't say you can trust me because I've made one immutable precreation divine decree and nothing's going to change.
You can trust me because I am working out everything that happens. I am working everything that happens. I am controlling, determining, writing, authoring, whatever word he would use, everything that happens. And so you can trust me when I say that this one thing's going to happen because I make all things happen. He never says that. It's always who I am. It takes away the relational nature of the Bible, of God's relationship with his people throughout. That we can trust him because we know him. No, you trust him because he determines everything.
And that's R.C. Sproul's, or was R.C. Sproul's mantra. You know, he knows better now, but we can't trust one of God's promises. We can't trust one of God's promises unless God is micromanaging every single molecule in the universe. I just don't, you know, when we talk about different worldviews and stuff, I just don't understand that kind of thinking. That seems really weak to me. It seems really
and I guess
weak.
In the moment, in a debate setting, I don't know how to say that.
Right.
Yeah. And I guess that's what we'd have to practice.
Practice being mean.
Having
confrontational,
direct phrases that express this. And that's something that I'm going to have to work to fashion is, having these statements ready, knowing what they're going to say and having these statements ready.
Right.
That are direct and get the point across, as opposed to what I did, which was, well, we don't see that. And, that doesn't really mean, and that kind of language.
Yeah. And I did that too. And you guys can watch our rebuttal. We won't go into it, but it was very much, well, I kind of see things this way, type of thing, instead of just being like, no, That's ridiculous. I want to play this just briefly, and I'm not going to play my answer because this is my mea culpa cringe part. But here's a question in the cross-examination that they asked us.
Does God know the future in meticulous, exhaustive detail?
Yes.
So your answer was yes. I'm not going to play my answer because it's just cringe. Because I went on this long, sort of tirade, and then they were just like, okay, done. Moving on to the next question. But what was the point in asking that? And what is that question? This is what we should have done. Let's go with yes. Let's just say, yes, whatever. We're not going to talk about, all of the different nuances and, does God change his mind and all the different stuff that can go along with that. And?
Right. Yes, and?
Right. Yeah. And where was it? Is it in here in the questions about predestination? I just want to see if this is where they asked us about predestination.
In what sense, in Acts chapter 4, in what sense did God predestine?
Yeah, that must have been in their cross-exam or our cross-exam of them. Where was it that we asked them about how does predestined mean prior to creation? Where did we ask them that? Because I felt like that was a good point. But then you pressed it and you said, so because of in Ephesians 1 it says, chosen in him before the foundation of the world to be holy and blameless before him, and having predestined us unto adoption, that this predestined is this clause in the Greek, therefore it ties back to the chosen in him before the foundation of the world. Therefore, predestination is before the foundation of the world, and in Acts 4 it means predestination before the foundation of the world. This was essentially their argument.
Right. And I think some of that was good, that we got them to say plainly that they are extrapolating from other passages and other ideas onto Ephesians.
I think that might be here actually.
Herod, Pontius Pilate, the Jews and Gentiles to do whatever his plan.
He asked us, what is predestined?
What does predestined mean? He predestined them to do whatever they did, the various things that they did. How do you take that?
That God knew what it would take.
Maybe this is an app.
At
one point, we basically just said, they asked us, what is predestination? And we were just like, it means to decide beforehand.
Right.
And
so that is this is you gave me a bit of a segue, and I'm going to jump on it. And maybe we went through the end. We went through the intro. Okay. So what I need, and maybe we can, some sort of an analogy or pithy statement that expresses how God can decide one thing beforehand and not other things beforehand. Maybe it's the plane analogy.
What we should have done, and I know why I didn't do this, maybe this is just my ego or whatever, but there's already an analogy that's been used ad nauseum. And I think that I just didn't want to use it because of, we're a bunch of flowerians, flowerites and stuff, which is the sting operation. So God can predetermine a particular, and that's what I was trying to get to in one of my comments here was, you're talking about specific details and we're talking about outcomes. There are only a certain number of outcomes that God had to predetermine to happen, like a sting operation. A police officer can predetermine that a sting operation will occur without needing to predetermine all of the criminals in the entire city's, thoughts, desires, and actions. And their position was there's too many factors. There's too many factors at play. If God, predetermined this, there's too much at play for him to see to it that it happens. And besides that fact, it doesn't teach an immutable precreation divine decree.
And I love that they said that out loud. And I love that we got to rebut it a little bit and talk about it a little bit. That they just don't see how, if you acknowledge that there's millions of details, I don't even, there's millions of details that went into making sure that the cross happened or this meeting happened, or I was like, I don't even know if that's true. It's just kind of, that's over the top. You're just front loading your argument, well, how did he know that Samaritan woman would be at the well to say that this meeting was predestined? It's just like, it's so much simpler than that. People go to the water every single day. She has to go to the well every single day. Like, it's just, they built a town there, below the water well, and she has to walk up to that. It's just, it's not that hard to know that. But yeah, how does that mean?
Immutable
they
precreation, divine decree.
Right. But they said God can't do it any other way, and it's just like, okay, say that again. Say that God can't figure things out unless He meticulously controls everything. Say that one more. Can you just repeat that, please, for the audience? I love it. Please say that more, because that's such a weak position. That's such a bad argument. That's such a low view of God.
Mm. And here, to your point on that, let's play what you said and we can talk about it, because I saw this was in your notes. And so
in what sense? In Acts chapter,
I'm just going to fast forward that a bit.
That God knew what it would take in the time and the place that He chose to become flesh and enter into history. And He knew intimately, in detail, and in a way that we can't fathom, all the inner workings of the motivations of the people in power that would need to be determined in order to get His plan accomplished. And He was able to do that without also at the same time meticulously decreeing their evil desires.
What is your understanding of?
By the way, I think this was fine. I think you got your point across fine, and the content is there and stuff, and we're having to speak on the fly, and so this is quite difficult. But here's his question about the
word predestined. It says praorizo, to predestined.
Oh,
whatever.
the Greek. Oh,
the word praorizo means a set thing. It means a set thing because I'm a first-year Greek student and I don't understand intermediate Greek grammar. Or you aren't a first-year Greek student, you do understand intermediate Greek grammar, and you think you can trick me. Right. That words have set standard meanings in Greek and don't need to be surrounded by entire context of phrases and grammatical structures,
right,
to mean anything.
And we just point this out here. Here it goes. Like,
however, your plan predestined to occur. What their hands did was predestined by God. It doesn't sound like He's put everything in. Your understanding of the word praorizo, predestined, in that passage.
He decided beforehand that certain things would take place. Whatever you decided beforehand, that doesn't mean you decided everything that happened. You didn't decide all of the intentions, evil desires of the men involved in the crucifixion of Jesus.
Good.
Does that predestination of?
And I think that, I go on to point out the whole outcomes versus specific details here, but the word predestined just means to decide beforehand. And Chris Fisher in his review pointed out something really interesting too, is that, and you would appreciate this, Eric, I don't know if you saw this part, but at the very end of his review,
no, I didn't.
He talked about, I think it's Clement or someone that's talking about how the Jews specified a particular answer to Jesus, and how he likes to take this quote from Clement and just put it on the screen and go, all right, Calvinists, which one of these words is predestined? And it's just the word predestined isn't in there. And the word that's translated as predestined is that they specified an answer. And so he makes the point, and I've not yet decided on this, but I think it's an interesting point, that predestined can also just mean referring to the past, something that you decided that you would do. So he's like, and in context, he made a really good point about the context of Acts 4, is that the thing that the Jews were struggling with is the Messiah is dead. Like, God wouldn't let His Messiah get killed. And so they needed to be encouraged that He didn't die on accident. So back when Jesus died, this was predestined. This was planned to happen. It wasn't like an accident, in the sense that back, if that makes sense, back then, this is what happened. This is what God wanted to happen. Not that it was predestined beforehand to happen. And obviously, Chris maybe has some theological convictions that inform that position. But I think it's a really interesting as far as first century, or not first century, but early Greek usage, Christian usage of the term. I thought that was really interesting. So, yeah. Should we just keep playing this section?
Keep going.
Be right back. Include their evil desires and evil actions.
No, I would say that.
I would say did not decide their evil desires.
Okay. So when it says, if we compare Acts 2:23 and Acts 4, what's that?
You go ahead.
Acts 2:23, it says, according to the definite plan and foreknowledge of God, you crucified and killed by the hands of lawless men. we have a similar idea there, is that Jesus was delivered up according to a definite plan of God, crucified and killed by the hands of lawless men. And in Acts 4, both Herod and Pontius Pilate, who were partly responsible for his death, the Gentiles and the Jews, like the Roman soldiers and the Jewish crowds who called for his crucifixion, to do whatever your hand and your plan had predestined to take place. He's just talking about Herod's, things irrelevant to Jesus' crucifixion, and Pontius Pilate, just what Pontius Pilate.
Yeah, BJ says here that he had an AG pastor, a college pastor, but he knew some Greek, say that predestination just means to mark out, put boundaries around something. So yeah, the boundary issue is the horizo, which is where we get the English word for horizon. See, look at how smart I look by talking about this. And it's setting the boundaries, around something, specifying something. But I don't even have an issue with the more deterministically sounding predestined, because I don't think that God needs to predestine every molecule in order to predestine one thing to happen. So
I just the idea, there's just like this plan. There's this idea that we're the only ones who have thought about these deep issues.
Right.
And in their favor as to why they think that, in the wider evangelical world, that's true.
Nobody cares.
Nobody cares about this stuff. Nobody cares to preach sermon after sermon and write book after book about proorizo.
Right.
They don't care. That's not the kind of ilk they are. And I'm not saying one ilk is better than another ilk. I wish my ilk would care more.
They should care, and we should care.
We can't get Southern Baptist figures onto this program. And I'm not saying this, they should talk to us because we're so popular and we have so many subs. We have like 1,000, we have like 1,100 subs. Whatever. But they won't come on. We're let's be honest. Us and Dr. Flowers are the only really people who are regularly talking about this online. Who else is doing this specific thing? Am I missing somebody?
Right. I mean, we have a few podcasts like Bible Bro Down and Kevlar and Kevin Thompson who talks regularly about this and stuff.
Sure.
But in terms of, and that's why we did the episode, rest in peace traditionalism, rise and fall of traditionalism. It doesn't exist anymore.
Right. So we can't, and these figures, these guys who could actually make this a bigger conversation than our little channel could, won't come on here because frankly, they don't care. They have other stuff going on.
It seems that way. Yeah.
They have others. It's too much of a problem. It's the price to pay is too high. So all that we have is the Presbyterians preaching about proorizo every Sunday. And so they think that they're the only ones who have thought about this.
Right.
And so they operate off this baseline. Well, since you guys haven't thought about this, the word proorizo just means this.
Yeah.
And you guys haven't thought about what it means.
Right.
And it's just,
that was one thing that helped keep me out of Calvinism in terms of, there were a lot of people that were really smart around me who were mostly Southern Baptist traditionalists. And I encountered Calvinism and I was like, surely somebody has a response to this. Surely somebody has thought about this before, because clearly this is not what I've been taught. These are all really smart people. And so I started having some conversations and got some books and talked to my pastor and talked to a mentor friend of mine, and they did have answers. And I think that the frustrating part while we're ranting about this is that whether it's Arminians or provisionists or whatever else, and I was listening to a sermon from Ed Litton, who's the president of the Southern Baptist Convention, new president of Southern Baptist Convention. He talks about how a lot of preachers just skip past Romans 9, because it's too hard and it's too controversial, or they'll read Ephesians 1. There's a sermon coming up in our church and someone's teaching on Ephesians 1. And most of the time we just avoid the discussion of chosen and predestination and stuff like that. But guess what? People in the audience are going to have questions. They're going to go to the internet and they're going to search for answers. And what are they going to find? They're going to find reformed answers. And so, we need to deal with these things. We need to not avoid these things. And the annoying thing to me about it is people will say, we've been arguing about this for hundreds of years. We just can't understand, it's never going to end and stuff. Well, the Presby guys certainly seem to think they have it figured out. and they're not backing down, and they're speaking of this as though this is absolutely clear and there's no question. So why should we speak any differently? And I was talking to another brother online just earlier today. I think he commented, and I won't, specify who he is. I won't predestine who he is. But, he kind of made the comment that he didn't really believe in predestination, or that he had an issue with predestination. And some people will make these comments like, oh, I don't really believe in predestination election. Yes, you do. They're biblical. You're just going to ignore it. You just Sharpie that part out of your Bible. You just don't believe in it. You just read it and you go, ah. And I get it. This is coming from the guy who feels like he has to have an answer to everything. He feels like he has to be an answer to everything.
And I
get
answers. I get it. My way of having my toe in the water in the kingdom is to do a podcast where we talk about these things. And if I was on the ground floor as a pastor, I'm doing this every single day. I'm just trying to help people, in their marriages and in their families, and serving the church and getting these things. I got to get stuff done. Then I could see how this can take away from that. That this sounds to sit there and navel gaze about philosophical and theological issues that doesn't get anything done. I get it. I get why I'm not going to, as a pastor, as a teaching pastor, somebody who has influence over what the church is teaching. I would maybe avoid this most of the time, or if not completely. I completely understand that. The problem is that, like you said, people are going to have questions and they're going to go there. But what you're doing then is you're only attracting a certain type, and you're not going deep enough. You're not people who want to be intellectually challenged, who are up for the theological challenge, who can hold two things at one time and say, hey, we have Calvinist pastors on staff and we have non-Calvinist pastors on staff. And one Sunday we're going to have this dude preach Romans 9. And then another Sunday we're going to have this dude preach Romans 9. And come to both, please. And then go be brothers afterwards. Like people who want to do that sort of thing and who can handle that sort of thing, you aren't giving them what they need or what they would like to see from the pulpit. They aren't getting that. And so where do they go? They go to the Presbyterian church and they get it there. So, I completely understand why they think they're the only ones that think about these things. I lament that my side doesn't seem to care. I get why my side doesn't seem to care. But I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time, right, and begin to talk about this. But
yeah. And the point is that I made to a pastor friend of mine the other day is that when you read something like Ephesians 1 and you walk away and you don't talk about the predestination and election and stuff, so you just left this massive question mark, and then people are going to walk away wondering, am I chosen? Or maybe I'm just not chosen. Maybe I'm just not predestined. Or maybe, maybe my dad, maybe he's just not chosen. Maybe my sister, maybe my friend, maybe he's just not chosen. Oh yeah, and then what? Like, is that what you want them to walk away? Because there will be a handful of them that walks away. And to me, it's so incredibly simple. we did the demystifying election episode and being chosen in him and being predestined unto adoption, demystifying predestination episode. It just seems so simple to me. It's like completely non-controversial, but we just have to talk about it. We can't ignore it. And I feel like people think that it's like inaccessible or something, but
yeah.
Anywho.
Yeah.
Let's, this is, BJ requested this. I hope this is the right section. So this is when we ask him a question and we'll see how it goes. Question. So Paul writes in Ephesians 4:20, do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God. So preliminarily, do you believe that this is teaching that when we sin, we grieve and dishonor God?
Yes.
So if so, is this genuine grief on God's part? And
yes,
if so, why did God immutably decree something that grieves and dishonors him?
Because it glorifies his name. To save people that do all that kind of stuff, and to justify them, and for Christ to pay for their sins, and to bring cowards and sinful people into heaven to do that kind of thing.
Do our sins glorify God, or do they? So what he just said, by the way, is he said, these sins grieve God, but that God gets glory for bringing us out of them. But that's not the point. The point is that the actual sins that grieve God themselves were predestined and immutably decreed by God. So he's speaking libertarianly, as though God, so God's immutably decreeing sins so that he can redeem them and get glory, is what I should have said. Is that what you're saying? Because otherwise you're just saying oh yeah, God gets glory from rescuing us from our sin. That's not controversial. That's not even your claim. They dishonor him.
They dishonor him, but his redemption of us from the penalty from them by the blood and the suffering of Christ glorifies his mercy.
Yeah, I see where he changes the subject. See, this is it. This is so much harder on the fly to catch. Because now I catch it. I go, oh, he changed the subject. He talked about the redemption of the sins. That's not what you were talking about. But in the moment, I can see how debating can be this sort of skill where you catch these things on the fly. And I'm used to being able to read them and catch them. But when someone says them in the moment, that's harder.
Yeah. And I'm that guy that I put, I don't know if this would annoy you, Eric. I think it annoys my wife, but it's just part of marrying me. I put subtitles on everything I watch. And I
think it's what? You do what?
I think it's psychological. I feel like I can't hear. It's like insecurity. Like I feel like I can't hear unless there's subtitles on like a movie or a TV show or something. Like I just watched the movie.
Then you're reading and not watching.
No,
we need to have an intervention.
It's a blanket. It's a secure. I'm watching and then I'm like, oh, I didn't quite catch that. Oh, that's what he said.
Everybody in the comments, like, what did the streamer say?
The point is,
let's slam this dude and get him to rethink his life. What is he doing? Subtitles and everything that you watch. This is a poll question. I'm never letting this go. What is wrong with you?
You create a poll. I've been doing all the polls on the community thing.
You have
do one. This is going to be the next one. Let's keep playing. No, but the reason why I say that is because I'm a visual person. And so I feel like I can track with someone visually. And this is going to sound weird, but I think it's true. When someone's talking, is that a failure grade that they just get?
I don't know what that means. I'm almost 40. What do I know? That's something they say. I don't know.
Look, Jackie's on team subtitles. So there you go. I do that.
There cannot be more people like you. There can't be.
100%. That's going to be the poll. We're going to create it tonight. And that's what it's going to say. The point is that I'm a visual person. And I actually, when I hear people talk, I see subtitles in my brain. I kid you not. That's how I think.
My world is reeling right now. I can't.
If we ever get a chance to hang out, Eric, and this is the weird thing about it. This is completely tangent, but I don't really get that feeling when I'm in the cinema, in the movie theater. But for some reason, if I have subtitles accessible, I just have to see, there you go, BJ and me and your wife, just team subtitles right there.
What is happening? How do you stay married to this person? How?
Eric's like, we got to end this podcast. It's over. No, we can't do
look
this.
How many people.
Irreconcilable differences.
Are you kidding me? So you're reading, you're not watching. Is that?
No, it's not. It's just, it's a secure, you don't hear something and then you look and you're like, oh, okay, that's what they said. Let's continue. Immutably decrees us to do things that grieve and dishonor him. That also glorifies him.
Yeah, all things work together for his glory. Yes, he has planned everything for even evil in the world is ultimately for the highest good there is.
He said all, even evil thing is for the highest good. So it dishonors and glorifies. This is what I should have said, Eric. It dishonors and glorifies him. And I think I did actually.
Glorify himself, whether that's his justice or whether that's his justice against evil people or his mercy on evil people, he will glorify himself through all the events that he has planned to take place.
2 Thessalonians 1, verses 8 and 9 encourages the Thessalonian believers.
This has nothing to do with my question.
No.
This has nothing to do with my question.
Who were brutally persecuted by Jews, and so much so that Paul and his associates had to leave town. It says it is a righteous thing with God to repay with wrath and to destroy them and to throw them into everlasting fire. So
because people do wrong things and it's a righteous thing for God to destroy them, step 3, immutable precreation, divine decree. Or he's decreed things that glorify him and dishonor him at the same time. What is this?
Those who trouble you and persecute you. It is a righteous thing for God to do that. He will glorify his wrath and his justice in paying people back for their sins, especially the sins against God's people.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we're in disagreement on that. I guess what I'm confused on is how God immutably decrees sins that glorify him and dishonor and grieve him at the same time.
Well, like you said, it's coming back to this distinction we make, is that it's a violation of his moral will. It's a violation of his righteousness. But yet, it's still according to his plan that he works all things for his own glory, including, yes, the evil actions of men. I mean, the evil actions of men, for example, are a prerequisite for Jesus having to die in the first place. It was since the whole purpose of creation is to glorify God and glorify Jesus as the Savior. Well, what's required for him to be a Savior is people need saving, and so therefore the evil actions of men also.
I feel like their answers were actually contradictory on this point, because he seems to indicate right here that sin is required for Jesus to die. So in order for God to create a world in which he's glorified, centering around Jesus, then he needed sin. And then this is what I ask.
Are part of the plan. So yes, it violates God's moral law and violates his righteousness, but it's also in accordance with his plan.
Does that mean that God needs evil in order to be seen as good and glorified?
That's what he just said, right? Isn't that what he just said? And then listen.
No, it just means that he wants to glorify the entire spectrum of his attributes.
What does that even mean?
But also his.
Here's what it means. This is what I wish I had said. God wants to glorify himself on the full spectrum. He not only wants to glorify himself in his mercy, he also wants to glorify himself in his justice and his righteousness via his wrath against sinners. Therefore, he has immutably decreed every evil that comes to pass so that he can glorify himself by having mercy on a number of people, and then leaving others in their state so that he can show the full spectrum of his character and be glorified in the full spectrum of it. And then my question is, why? Can God not show his justice and righteousness without, pouring out wrath on evil? Can't we see a proper use of justice and righteousness without needing to see it in the context of people doing evil things? Aren't we able to recognize someone who's holy, righteous, and just outside of their interaction with evil people? I don't know.
It seems like a created construct. And I guess I don't know how to say that. You've created this, you're making claims, you're making a statement. God wants to glorify himself in the full breadth of his attributes. Where's that in the full spectrum of his attributes? What are you talking about? I don't. Where's that in the Bible? What do you mean by that? You're bringing other theologies and other claims into this situation, and you're front loading it with therefore determinism, or therefore that assuages the tension of saying God decrees what dishonors him.
Right. And then Matt makes this point here. All of their arguments are predicated upon the Calvi understanding of original sin. Everybody is born wanting only to sin, so God lets a lot of it happen to demonstrate things for his people.
That's probably true.
And it's not even lets, right? I would argue that lets, permits is not deterministic language. So Carl here...
But that's what they would say. That's what they would say.
Right,
they would say,
yeah. Carl is one of our Calvinist interlocutors here on the program. He says, Carl is our version of Brent from 101. Brent, isn't it Brent Stanfield or something? He comments a lot in 101. So he says, the only thing left is if God predetermines all things or just many things, but either way, God is moral and good. That is, if God determined the cross or any other sinful event. This is our contention. And this was your point on a program with 101, Eric, was that as soon as you say God has immutably decreed whatsoever comes to pass for his own glory, the yet so is not the author of sin, you've lost us. You lost us at the first thing. You need to demonstrate, for us to be on the same page, you've got to understand that you've lost us. How was it that you phrased this? That you said
that just because once you say the first thing, just because you say the second thing, that doesn't make it follow.
Right.
That you're going to have to, if you want to understand us, you're going to have to understand just basic understanding of what our criticism of Calvinism is that just saying two things doesn't mean that you've solved the problem. It's just saying, okay, he does it in some way that doesn't make him the author of evil, doesn't assuage the logical deduction, doesn't assuage the tension of the first thing you said.
Right.
You can't. You have to understand that from our perspective, you can't just say that thing and then we go, well, as long as you say it. That's not how this works. And if you're semper reformata, if you're doing that, then you can't just, well, you need to stop there and, don't bring any Bible into it.
But who are you, oh man? Who are you, oh man, to talk back to God? Is Paul's already dealt with this? Paul's already dealt with this objection. And then it comes our frustration of, okay, now let me go on my hour-long explanation of Romans 9 because
this is why I'm saying one of the main takeaways, and I don't even know how to do this. And you in the audience and in the comments, and when we make polls, when we make posts and do this, help us do this. How do we come up with simple, pithy statements or analogies, metaphors to understand these things? And so when maybe it's the sting analogy, and we just need to embrace it and use it. And this is why I think this is powerful, because he who shall not be named has to mock it because it's effective. He has to go story time with Uncle Leighton. He has to do that because it's actually an effective thing. And he wants to be the only one that can do story time, because he does story time all the time. He does analogy metaphor time all the time. But he wants to be the only one to do it, so he has to mock it. So it's effective, and we've got to come up with some of these ways of expressing these things without having to go into Romans 9 for an hour. So we need to do that, or we're not going to have strong rebuttals in these debates when we're asked.
Right.
We can't just go, as you and I are kind of doing now, well, it just seems obvious to me. He can predetermine some things. That's not going to work.
Yeah. Right.
That doesn't cut it.
Yeah. Andrew Kiefer, I just got to put this up here. Calvinism, every fart predestined before the foundation of the world for his glory.
I love theological bathroom humor. I think it's fantastic. And how is that not true?
It is. It's true that on determinism, God micromanages your diarrhea.
I don't. Oh my gosh.
Carl's asking a question here. Does God plan after the fact or in time? Does he react to man, which signifies learning something? I believe you'll say yes. It's a big difference between your position and theirs.
It is a big difference. Carl, I really want you to answer this question. Please answer this question. What is wrong with it if God learns something?
Because if God learns something, then that adds to his knowledge, and he can't be omniscient if he can't know all things if he learns something and adds to it, because that means that his knowledge is limited. But I think that, and he uses the term react here, reacts to man. God responds to man all the time. He's not reacting. He's not like, he says, I'm planning this destruction against you. And if you don't repent, I'm going to destroy you. Oh, you repented. Okay. I'm going to do something. I'm going to plan something different. That's not reacting.
So wait a minute. I'm wondering how this works. I will destroy Nineveh. I want you to go there, Jonah, and tell them that they're going to get wrecked. I will wreck them.
Get wrecked, Nineveh. That's what Jonah said.
Get wrecked, Nineveh. They repent. Did God really decree he was going to wreck Nineveh, or was he just kidding? So this is my issue. Oh, are you saying God learned something? Are you saying that God is duplicitous? Are you saying that God says things and he's just kidding? He didn't really intend to wreck Nineveh.
God be like, JK, LOL.
Is that what he's doing?
I decreed all of this for my glory.
Is that what he's doing, Carl? Because you can go and you can make it sound like, oh no, he learned something. That's a little bit better. That's objectively better to me than God be like, JK, LOL.
Here. Let's look at the Bible, guys. Let's look at the Bible. So it says, God says, or Jonah says, yet in 40 days Nineveh shall be overthrown.
Did he mean that?
So he's received this from
JK?
the Lord. Arise, go to Nineveh. This is Yahweh talking. Go and preach the message I will tell you. This is the message that he preached. Yet 40 days and Nineveh shall be overthrown. That's the only thing that we see Jonah saying to Nineveh. I mean, maybe it was over, several days. I don't know. And then down here. So then God saw their works. Oh, snap. Oh, geez. Oh, gosh. Oh, man. God saw their works. Oh, boy. That they turned from their evil way. They repented. And God relented from the disaster he had said he would bring upon them, and he did not do it. Even before
what does
I
the
hold
word
to
relented mean on determinism?
it means that God is, this is what it means. It means God is baby talking. It means God has to use language to us to help us to understand what's going on. It's like God had a plan and then he relented, but actually he doesn't relent because of these two passages in 1 Samuel and Numbers. In spite of all of these other passages that talk about, God relenting and changing his mind. And
if you would do this, then I would do this. JK, LOL.
Yeah. Yeah. And even before I held to some of the, positions that I have now on this, I just never felt like, oh, nah, it doesn't really mean that he repented. It really doesn't mean that he changes his mind, because God can't do that. He can't change his mind. I'm just like, it says he changed his mind. I don't know how it works, but it says he changed it.
You and I did a thing. You and I did a thing that only our patrons got to see, where we talked about your views on this.
Right.
And I'm going to be honest, I'm not convinced. I don't, the force of the arguments you brought, where it's like, well, God says maybe, what does that mean? I think you're pegging too much weight onto those words and those concepts of might be's and maybes. And there's too much theological baggage on there. And I'm not convinced. But at the same time, the idea that this kind of thing isn't a valid, plausible explanation for how God could mean he relented, that dynamic omniscience, that some things are settled and some guys who hold to DO believe that some things are settled and some things are open. They're not saved. That is so absurd.
You're denying one of God's fundamental attributes.
Just the what's the H3, the Ethan from H3, just that's getting clipped and turned into a GIF. You're doing this over.
We don't have the skills. It's okay. I don't have the skills for it.
You're doing that over a philosophical explanation of biblical passages where God says, I was going to do something and I changed my mind and I'm not going to do it anymore. I relented. Maybe you'll do this. Maybe you'll do that. And dynamic omniscience guys are going like, okay, wait, what? Okay. So it's not fixed. Some things are open. Some things are fixed. And they're offering a philosophical, and you don't like that, but they're offering a philosophical.
The eternal now is a philosophical perspective.
It is
very much.
It is that I have an eternal now kind of feeling top down like a helicopter on a parade. I have this way of thinking about it, and fully admitting I could be saying it's not a valid option and throwing these dudes out of the kingdom and just getting triggered and having seizures over an explanation about how God can actually relent of something he said he was going to do. Calvinists don't deal, I don't mean this directly at you, Carl, but just Calvinists don't deal with this stuff. They kind of ignore it. And I think they're not taking the Bible seriously enough. You're not taking the Bible seriously enough when he says he relented. What does that even mean? And it's Calvin's, he lisped. He's speaking down to us is a terrible answer.
It's not, and he doesn't just say it a couple of times. This is not just something that he says once or twice. And that's what makes me feel like I'm taking crazy pills when I have these conversations. And we did this in the Q&A. You can watch it. We probably won't go over it here, where they ask us to go over this passage from Numbers about where God says, or it was 1 Samuel, I can't remember which, where God says he doesn't change his mind. I'm not like a man that I shouldn't change my mind. And I'm just like, you've got these two passages that you just, form this metaphysical reality over across all of the other passages and go, because these two passages say this, all of these other passages are like God saying, well, JK, LOL.
And it's not, It is a detriment to God's character and to the revelation of the word of God to say that he didn't really mean he was going to destroy Nineveh, that he was lisping, just talking. What's the fancy
Baby
word they
talk?
use? Yeah, anthropomorphism.
Anthropomorphism, yeah.
He's
yeah.
This makes God duplicitous. It's not a valid answer. You don't get to appeal to that and make God duplicitous. You're going to have to answer this in a better way. So
yeah, that's what we should have pressed them on.
Yeah, and again, just not being comfortable, not being the first one, totally comfortable in these conversations with you with a long form. We get to spend an hour and a half on something and say what we want to say, but we need to come up with like pithy, short statements.
Yeah, Matt calls it condescending anthropomorphism. It's condescending language. God has to baby talk to us so that we can understand. God's not strong enough and wise enough to use words to communicate the truth to us in a way that we can understand it. He needs to use other language so that we believe things like God changes his mind from the text, but actually he believes I don't change my mind. Hold on, I gotta get the screen back up here. Share screen. Let me make sure I turn on the audio because I.
So yeah, what is this is my question to everybody. Maybe we clip this out or something. What is a phrase or statement or analogy? Maybe it's the sting analogy. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's a phrase that expresses God determines some things without determining all things.
And that was the whole point of the,
Let's help us out with that. Let's come up with these things that we can, put out there or make known or become the standard answers we give when the Calvinists try to go, God decides some things. Step one, God decides those things. Step two, step three, immutable precreation, God decree. When they do that type of arguments, we go, what?
Yeah.
What is that?
Here's what we do. I know what we do. We just share this meme. declares the end, from the beginning, declares the end from the beginning, declares everything in between. This is the and I respond to this. Go look in the debate. It's timestamped for you. He asks us, what is your exegesis of Isaiah 46:10? And I give him, my take on that. And their whole premise is that God declares the entire future, but he says, I declare the end from the beginning. Mm-hmm. It doesn't say that he declares the entire future. You're reading that onto the text.
Carl, I respect your answer when you say that children shouldn't be baptized. But just know that you're going against almost all of Christians in theology down through the ages. Carl, I respect your answer, but just know that when you say that Peter wasn't the first pope and the popes are not Christ's vicar on earth, that you're going against all of the Christians in theology down through the ages.
Right. Yeah, so we're in agreement that we disagree with classical theism, but we're not presupposing that classical theists and scholars are the gateways to Christian orthodoxy and that we should submit to everything that they say. Much like Calvin and Luther and all of them would not have said, "Oh, right, let me just think of the people that agreed with me in the past." They would just say, "Show it to me in red and black, or red letter or black letter." And then we can have the conversation, right? Here's my buddy, Christophoros, here in New Zealand. Calvinists hold to ADS. At least they're consistent with their view, unlike Provs who still affirm it while denying. I don't know what ADS means. So you'll have to type that in the comments so that we can enjoy the joke. Let's play the rest of this while you're
and
typing.
his justice and his holiness.
You want to take this next question, Eric, and I'll take the final one if we have time.
Yeah. So, oh no, that's this.
This is so. What do we skip to? This
skip to
I thought this was interesting. I've always wanted to ask this question, and so I did.
So let's move on last 2 minutes.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we all agree here that the chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy him forever, I would assume. But if there's a group of people that God immutably decreed to destroy, how can it be said that their chief end and their purpose is to glorify God and enjoy him forever?
The chief end of man in general, man was created for communion and fellowship with God. But ultimately, God made a decision to glorify the entire spectrum of his attributes. And there's a passage of scripture, I'll just close it with reading it. At the end of Romans 9, I remember reading Romans 9 probably 400 times and slamming my Bible shut and pushing it across the table.
Because we've never read Romans 9, and we don't have an interpretation that that's at all plausible or makes any sense of that. In fact, when I read Romans 9, I took this purple Sharpie right here. I just want you guys to see it right here. That whole page is purple. The whole page. I just got rid of it. It's just not in there. Don't know how to do it.
And so, yeah, I don't know the answer to this question. Do you just call them out for doing this I'm better than you routine? I don't, or maybe you say something like, I don't think it's valid for you pointing out the difficulty of the theology as a point for why the theology is true. Just because it's hard doesn't mean it's true. Anyway, like, do you do that kind of thing?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. I'm learning.
Yeah,
sure.
I think you do. I mean, it sounds, it's a bit rough, but
Popping out of the room. But what it says is Romans 9:22. What if God, desiring to show his wrath and to make his power known, endured with much long suffering the vessels of wrath prepared for destruction, and that he might make known the riches of his glory on the vessels of mercy, which he had prepared beforehand for glory. Human beings in general were created for communion and fellowship with God, but not every single one of them is going to glorify and enjoy him by being a vessel of mercy, because that's not how God has revealed what his plan is. He has vessels of wrath too.
But doesn't that mean that the chief end of most men is not to enjoy him forever?
Not a chance, because we're post-millennial and we think that God's going to save a vast multitude, so vast no man can count them, as numerous as the stars in the heavens and the sand by the sea.
So my unique niche eschatological view rescues me from this claim here.
But arguably, every person's chief end is not to enjoy him forever.
Man
so that statement is meant more of a general, like man in general's chief end is this.
I feel like this completely undermines the reason why I press them on this is because the chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. Amen. God's not planning for any to perish. He wants them to not just glorify him in their destruction, but to enjoy him in the resurrection forever. And so, and now we get this. That's a phenomenal statement. But now what we get is this. Well, that's in general because God's got this end times plan where he's going to rescue a multitude of people. But it's really just more of a general thing. And it's arguably not something that we see bearing out now, is it? Sure, maybe God has some plans, but it's not something that we see bearing out now.
Right.
So who's more consistent with this? The chief end of man is to glorify him and enjoy him forever. Provisionists or determinists who affirm an immutable precreation divine decree?
Wherein most men are condemned to hell without chance of redemption.
Right. And my friend said it was absolute divine simplicity was what that ADS was. So they hold to absolute divine simplicity. At least they're consistent with their glory, unlike the Provs who still affirm it while denying it. I completely disavow divine simplicity. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, I wonder in what way he thinks we're.
Yeah. I'm not sure what is meant by divine simplicity. I'm still learning about some of that. Peace out, Matt. It's good to see you here. Time for dinner, he says. Keep up the good work. Everyone like and subscribe if you haven't already. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, one of the best things you can do for us is like these videos. That really pushes it to the algorithm. And comments actually help too. If you get into an argument with somebody underneath the comments, that's pretty great.
We should pick more fights. We should put flame war comments on here and get more fights.
Right. But
so again, Carl, so the only way we can trust God is if he determines everything. I don't see how that falls. We trust him because of his character. The character you're impugning by making it seem like he's lisping and having a condescending anthropomorphism where he has a supposedly divine inspired author write things that aren't actually in his mind.
It's God breathed.
It's a God breathed scriptures, but God has that author breathing things that weren't in his mind. I'm going to destroy Nineveh while believing he's not going to.
Yeah.
Wow. I don't think you've thought this through. I don't think you've thought through that at all. And again, Dio makes God into a powerful being, but not almighty. I don't. How? That's
question for Carl. Would you agree that if God is not in meticulous control of every molecule, that we can't trust his promises? Because this is the kind of claim that we're coming up against, right? And that I think is rather weak. I think it's weak. I think you serve a weak. I'm not, maybe not you, Carl, specifically, but I think that people that think that God can be thwarted by rogue molecules have a low view of God. And I think that playing both sides of the chessboard is a low view of God. I think it's more impressive if God plays one side of the chessboard and wins every time. We still got some time. I figure we'll just take up the our full recording time together, and we'll just keep going.
I could not tell them for sure that
this is the end of. Oh, here we go.
Suffering.
Listen. This is great. This is exactly that point. I didn't even plan this.
My part, although I chafed at the idea of God's sovereignty for years, if I did not believe that evil and suffering and the hardships that I go through and that my congregation goes through, if I could not tell them for sure that God had a purpose for it and that it was decreed and planned by God, I don't know how I'd be able to give them comfort to get through it.
So the immutable precreation divine decree is the only way that you can give comfort to your congregation and to yourself.
No Christian before you has ever been able to give their congregation, no pastor, minister, priest in the history of the church. I
don't understand this thinking. I just don't understand it. I didn't plan to play this clip, but I just remembered that he said that right before this, and they're about to ask us a question.
All right. Next question coming at you. Let me pull this up real quick.
These questions were so hard to read.
Technically, but
impossible.
Specifically, both teams. Can you exegete Numbers 23:19 and discuss its relevance or lack thereof of this topic? How can God carry out this promise if he does not determine the future?
Oh, this isn't it. Oh, it is. Oh, yeah. Number 23:19. Yeah. I'm just gonna because I read it. A false prophet who's being incited to curse Israel. He says, "Rise up, Balak, and hear. Listen to me, son of Zippor. God is not a man that he should lie, nor son of man that he should repent. Has he said, and he will not do? Or has he spoken, and will he not make it good? Behold, I have received a command to bless. He is blessed." This is God's divine, immutable promise to Abraham that he's talking about here. Cannot reverse it. So what is he receiving? He's receiving a command to bless Israel. He's not going to reverse it. He's not like a man who's going to change his mind at a whim and do this. This isn't a God never, ever changes his mind about anything, because I think we see many scriptures that indicate that he does. However you want to encapsulate that with regards to God's foreknowledge and all of that is another question, but I think that it's pretty clear that he does and that this is a contextual statement.
All right.
We know that the false prophet was not able to curse. He was like a prophet for hire, and he keeps being told by Balak, go curse this people, and he keeps blessing them. And the reason for that is God had determined to bless Israel, and he couldn't reverse it.
Yeah, with regard to this concept of God changing his mind,
God determined to bless Israel, and therefore couldn't reverse it. Therefore, immutable precreation, divine decree.
We reject the idea that God changes his mind. With regard to things where this made reference to where it appears that God changes his mind with Moses' intercession or other examples. See, but when God interacts, when he talks to Moses in that case, when he interacts, he oftentimes tests. And that's something going on there, for example, is he's testing Moses, like Patrick said, to be an intercessor on behalf of the people. God did not really plan to break his covenant to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. There's no way he did. Like this text says, he cannot lie. So he was saying, Moses, what are you going to do? And of course, Moses actually, rightfully, in accordance with what God wanted him to do, he interceded on behalf of the people. Just like in the garden when God says, Adam, where are you? These are testing questions. They're not an admission of his lack of knowledge or anything like that.
There is no testing question in Exodus that he's talking about. What he said to Moses was, I'm sick and tired of these people. They're stiff-necked. I'm going to do a soft reboot, and I'm going to start over with you, Moses. I'm going to destroy all these people, and then I'm going to start over. Why would he say that if he had no plan whatsoever to follow through on that? You're talking about God not lying. God doesn't lie. How is that God not saying JK LOL? And then it specifically says that he repents. He's not dealing with the repent language. He's saying, so God tests. So this is what I wish I had said, right? And actually, we can't say anything here. This is the Q&A. But probably, and I've heard this said before, if I asked, so God says this in order to test Moses to elicit deterministically the response that he wants of his intercession between Israel so that he can be a figurehead and a pointer to Christ, right? So God said this, didn't really mean it, was talking to Moses in such a way that he said that he would, and then said that he changed his mind, but he really didn't, so as to elicit this response. Some views don't need to be refuted, they just need to be stated.
Like that. God, when he interacts with people, will talk like a man sometimes, and he will test his people in various ways. And that's an explanation of those texts that appear to say he's changing his mind.
But there are.
Who is the arbiter? Sorry, now I'm ranting on this, but like, who is the arbiter behind when God is talking like a man and when God is talking like God? Who
Your
gets
favorite
to decide
theologian.
that?
Yeah, your favorite theologian. I mean, that's.
I don't understand it. I just don't understand it.
There are
I
individuals who
really
say
wish
that.
I could respond to this.
There are
see,
individuals-
it was boiling. It was boiling. I was like, I don't want to respond to this.
There are open theists who have said that God asked Adam, "Where are you?" because he couldn't find him.
I know of no such open theists, by the way. I hear that. I don't know what he's talking about. I don't know what he's talking about.
Yeah,
I often hear
he
people
doesn't
saying
know.
this. John used that example. God said, "Where are you?" God sometimes asks rhetorical questions in order to confront us. Sure, yes, absolutely. Context determines that he knew exactly where Adam was, and he was asking him to lovingly confront him, to approach him, so that they could have a conversation.
Well, and another one was I definitely want to address this one because this was it's in the text, it's on the audio or the video there of what I actually said, but it was interesting that he I'm sorry, I don't mean to be rude, I forget their names.
Don and Patrick.
So Patrick.
Yeah.
The older gentleman is Patrick, right?
Yeah. That's right.
So Patrick, I think on two different occasions in which I couldn't answer, said, "Oh, I thought that I've heard you say that the cross could have failed. That if Pilate could change his mind, because what they're trying to trap us on is, well, if Pilate could change his mind or if Judas could change his mind, then the cross could have failed. Therefore, we need determinism to make sure that the cross doesn't fail." And what I said was, yeah, Judas, again, maybe it's about the analogy, and I should have used an alcoholic like an alcoholic. Judas made a series of decisions to where the end one was he was gonna betray Christ. And so I can look at it that way. But in theory, in abstract, could Pilate have done differently? Yes. And then he kind of projected, I think, that, oh, bam, got him. That means the cross could have failed. And what I said is that God would have figured out a different way. I don't see anything in the Bible or in reason to suggest that the cross could have only happened this way. That in a Roman province, in a Roman under Roman rule, where crucifixion was the way that you killed criminals.
All you got to do is poke people the wrong way and you get yourself crucified, right?
Right. It was a stickly time with prickly people, and the ancient world is a violent, brutal place where if you look at a Roman soldier wrong, they could just beat you to death in the street, and there's nothing anyone would do to stop them. So the fact that Pilate could have done something else, and as if the Pharisees wouldn't have gone to Herod or gone over his head or something like that, and it still would have happened, the idea that it could not have happened any other way, I find ridiculous. And God will, why am I the one saying that God will accomplish his purposes? Even if it would have happened a different way, God will get what he said will happen. That doesn't mean it has to happen that way. And I don't see anything in the Bible to suggest that it had to. So
God has options. This is what we can close with. So this is my favorite moment of the debate / the most cringe. I don't know what I called it earlier in the broadcast, but this is it. Okay, you guys ready for this? I'm gonna full screen this one. Here we go.
Okay.
So in James chapter 4, we have a principle that James lays out for us, that instead of saying, I'm going to do this or that tomorrow, we should say, if it's the Lord's will, I'll do this or that tomorrow. It's a general principle, not applied to anything in particular. What is your understanding of that? Is that somehow limited to particular things, or does this mean that God has a will about everything that'll happen in the future, which is our position? What is your understanding?
Yeah, that God could at any time frustrate your plans, and that God could at any time insert himself into creation such that what you thought was going to happen doesn't happen. And all.
What was I? What was I?
Man, when hunger calls, man.
What was I doing? It was. See, what happened was it was afternoon tea time. For those of you that are listening by audio, I mean, you heard the crackle, right? That was me just like breaking into some chocolate and just shoveling it into my face. And I wish I had it up on front of me, but Marlon posted about this. It's like, granted, there was another guy that just straight up busted out a sub and was like eating it. Apparently, that's what he said. And I apologize to Marlon and to our debate opponents. This is like, you can hear. Hold on, I just want to. We're gonna play this back.
You get muting yourself. You got to mute it. Okay, let's listen.
Listen to the crackle. I'm gonna pull us out so that you can just hear it in its full.
So in James chapter 4, we have a principle that James lays out for us, that instead of saying, I'm going to do this or that tomorrow, we should say, if it's the Lord's will, I'll do this or that tomorrow. It's a general principle, not applied to anything in particular. What is your understanding of that? Is that somehow limited, applied to anything in particular? If it's the Lord's will, I'll do this or that tomorrow. It's a general principle, not applied to anything in particular. What is your understanding of that? Is that somehow limited to particular things, or does this mean that God has a will about everything that'll happen in the future, which is our position? What is your understanding?
I remember trying to drown out the noise and like not really pay attention to it and listen to his question, and it didn't really register to me what was going on. I
can't hear that, right? Like, because I have these earbuds in, and so if I do this,
I was making sure to mute myself. I think I think during the debate, like our neighbor friends came over, and my daughter's little neighbor friend came over, and they were playing, and so they came in the door. Our front door is right here. They came in. I'm like muting myself and stuff.
Yeah. Well, I should have muted myself when I stuffed my face full of chocolate, but I didn't. It's embarrassing.
Hunger. The chocolate was there.
No disrespect to the platform of the gospel truth. I don't know what I was thinking. Like I saw this after the fact. Like I think I was scrolling through or I watched or something, and I was like, what am I doing? I'm like eating. And I specifically had my sandwich before the debate started that I wouldn't do this. So they wouldn't have to do this. And yet, stuffing my face full of chocolate. Back to James 4. Did you guys address that yet? Talking about did the Lord will?
Oh, I think God frustrates your plans.
Yeah, like where it says, does God, if we're going to go to such and such a city and say if the Lord wills, our position was God permits or determines everything. So if you're asking, Lord, if you will, then I'll do this, then, and in the debate, it was God can either permit that or he can determine that. But the bigger question is, on their side of things, how does James 4 point to an immutable precreation divine decree? It just doesn't.
Pull yourself out of the determinism mindset for a second.
Right.
And ask yourself, if I say I'm going to go somewhere, and then I say God can stop my plans and God can stop anything from happening, that's kind of a power statement, right? God has the power to do this, and I'm recognizing him as the power. Nobody else has the power to do anything like that. I'm recognizing him as the power that can stop anything that I want to try to do. I don't see how that is determinism at all. He's not saying, whatever I plan to do, God determines me to do it. It's actually God deciding that I'm going to do it. He doesn't say that. He said, whatever I decide to do, meaning he's decided on his own to do things. That's a libertarian free will.
But even for the debate point, and Chris Fisher was pointing this out, for the debate point, let's say that God determines that choice. Okay, let's say that. Anytime we do anything, we should say, God, you'll either determine or not to. How does this mean immutable precreation divine decree? It just doesn't. And that was the question of the debate. The question of the debate is not, is God deterministically sovereign?
Which we need to. That's what we need. One of the things we need to take.
I think Eric just disconnected himself. I'm sorry, guys. Let me just see if he's if he's gonna be back. You just disconnected yourself. Oh, here he comes. He's coming back. Just hold on, guys. Here he is. Add to stream. I was cracking up over here. I don't know what just happened, but I'm glad you're back.
Where was I? I don't know.
I just had no idea. Something about determining things and permitting things and divine immutable decree. Next time.
No, that's what we need to say is what does this have to do with the debate question? We need to repeat that over and over again. And instead of
it was like dong, and then your head got really big.
What?
Sure.
I moved my slider keyboard and pressed some sort of key that brought up like the programming code thing, and then it was weird. I have no idea.
MS-DOS?
Yeah, like a DOS looking. I'm not a programmer. I have no idea.
Neither. Just trying to sound smart, really.
Yeah, well, if I said that, I would say Prorizo.
Fantastic. Bulema, Prorizo.
That's right.
Shema. How many different words can I say? Thelema.
Yeah. But it was a great learning experience and glad we did it. Would I do it again? Yes. Would you do it again?
I think so. Do you think you would do a 2v2 or just try to do somebody one-on-one?
I think I would like to do a one-on-one. I think could do a 2v2. I
like the dynamic of 2v2, but it does make it difficult to have kind of like the back and forth, with the other side. It makes it a little bit.
It's true. It is more
maybe
crowded.
I should wait for my partner to respond.
Yes, it is more crowded. I think some tech issues could help with that, but having it all buttoned up from a tech perspective could have made that a little easier. But I think I would do it again. The one-on-one debate would be interesting. I can see how, and this is totally fine with me. I can see how, you're the provisionist perspective, you come as a pair, and people want to see the provisionist perspective. Right. Okay, that's fine. If that changes and it's like, come see Eric Kemp, who whoever that is, but it's fine. I don't. Despite how this may seem, there aren't a whole lot of topics that interest me. Oh, let's debate divine simplicity. I don't care.
I would love to do a 1v1 on this very topic. Like after I finished this debate, I was like, man, I feel like, and it was after listening to Chris Fisher's review that I was like, I feel like I could do this because from my perspective at the end of all of this, and we had some missteps, some strengths and some slip ups, but I think that this is just an indefensible position. It's just completely indefensible. And I think it's really easy to demonstrate that. And I hope to get another chance to do it.
Yeah, no.
Because we didn't do as good as we probably could have done. So
it was, I appreciate Marlon and John and Patrick for doing that and appreciate their time and their effort and preparing what they did and giving us the shot. And, we could do it again. We could run it back. We could, run it with somebody else. If Marlon reaches out to you, you reach out to Marlon and you do it. I'll be in the comments, trolling your opponent, and then another excuse to do a debate review, and then I could just like critique you and have no skin in the game. It'd be great. I could just critique you, and I didn't do anything, and it'd be great.
Exactly.
But yeah, if the opportunity arose, and I would do it again. But
yeah, well. That's probably good. We're right at the 2 hour mark. appreciate everybody for tuning in. Thanks to all of our patrons. Give us a like, give us a comment below, all that jazz. And,
we appreciate all of you. We'd love to see you over the Discord, and we where we do all our meme brainstorming, and hop in there for some chats. Yeah, that one was directly from a conversation in the Discord directly.
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff. We'd love to see you over there, and you can do that in YouTube now too. You can join our team on YouTube, and a little join button below this video. It should be there. We set that up, and you get cool emojis. I don't know how cool they are. No, it's a little symbol next to your name so people know that you are a member of our channel. So get a membership going or get a Patreon account going. We'd love to see you over the Discord. Help make all this better. Help us with how to come up with some of these phrases and sayings to get our position across, whether it's analogies or I love the condescending anthropomorphism, stuff like that. That stuff that catches the ear and gets our point across. We need more of those things. Thanks for watching.
Yeah. See you guys.